You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. There's a lot of great sales calls that we go on. We got to learn how to crush each one of them, the most important one. And today we're going to be talking about interviews. Now, I'm not going to title this podcast, how to crush the interview. But that's really, we're going to talk about that. But you got to understand that an interview is a sales call. And the same things apply about being prepared, about connecting with people, about understanding it's just not the product. In an interview, it's you. But when you're selling a product, it's not just about the product. It's about how you make the other person feel. It's about caring about them. It's about showing interest. It's about understanding their world and pulling that out. And I got Jason Price back on the show today. A founder, a CEO, somebody who hires a lot of salespeople. And if you really listen to this and apply it for that next interview you have, or even the next sales call, you're going to crush it. I'm telling you. You will get some really creative ideas and really comparing them against what everybody thinks you're supposed to do. So let's get into it with Jason. I want to make sure you're using nudge.ai. So let's face it, you got to have AI do all the prospecting for you. Finding out about all your target customers, finding out what they care about, what's important to them, finding out how you're connected to them. Also, make sure you're checking out Pipedrive's new capability about smart contacts. You don't have to type everything in anymore. It fills in all the company information, all the personal information on each contact. Check it out. I put a video on the YouTube channel Maverick Method on YouTube. Also, make sure you connecting up with me on LinkedIn. Let's get into the interview. Hey, Jason, welcome back to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me. So, just really getting 2018 kicked off. Just resetting in January, sort of getting our vision and plan set for the year. We actually had a record sales month in January. So, just a great start to the year for us.
Excellent. Hey, let's talk about job interviews. Because, a lot of the people ask me, hey, I'm going on this interview. Can you talk to me? Can you help me out? Well, what do you look for when you're interviewing a salesperson?
Well, I think the first thing, that I do is just sort of see how they relate and sort of interact within the interview, right? So, I think a lot of times, I always say the person asking the questions always controls the conversation. And so what I look for in the interview is, who's willing to sort of be willing to get out of their comfort zone, ask some questions, start really think about it, almost reverse engineering me to some degree by trying to sell me, right? By building the relationship and sort of, working that interview so that it's more of them, showing off their sales skills as opposed to, just sort of rotely asking questions. And so I typically look for someone that's really sort of able to use what I'd consider sales skills in the interview itself.
Yeah. Are you ever surprised that they come in thinking, hey, I'm experienced, talented, I went to a great school, look at my resume, and you're not appreciating them? Have you ever had that feeling?
No, it can happen sometimes, no doubt about it. I think more of what I get to is that, people are so prepared for the questions that they almost have these generic answers. I get that probably more than anything, where they just come in, they've prepared so much, and they've looked at every interview question online, they've gone through all these different forums and blogs, so they feel like they're just super prepared. But it's really hard to get to know somebody when they're just obviously regurgitating the same answer they've told whoever else has interviewed them a million different times. And so what I try to get into is really get to know the person, right? Really get to understand, what their strengths are, what their vision for their career is, what their motivations are. And I think what I run into more than anything is just almost an over preparation in responses, to where it's almost like a robot hitting me back on that. And so I think probably what I like more than anything is just having that natural interaction so I can really get to know the person. But definitely I've run into those situations where it's almost like they come in and they feel like they're the most qualified, and so they don't put the extra effort in to really sort of deliver a great interview, and those typically don't go very well.
And how well, I mean, I think they all do, a lot of people do, really good research on the typical questions, where do you want to be in 5 years, and demonstrate, tell me about your weaknesses, things like that. But how many of them actually go to your website and really understand what you do, download your product, use it, and, really bring in some, creative questions about, why did you choose to go this route versus this route? How do you compare against this company or that approach? Do they do well at that?
No, it happens very little. Yeah, I would say probably the most important thing that someone should do in an interview is just research and be prepared, like you said. But it's more than just looking at the website and understanding the product. So to your point, the people that have really come in and downloaded the software, tried it out, done some research online, had a sense of how long we've been in business, what markets we've gone after, maybe checked into some things we have online that talks about our strategy. Those are the interviews that go much, much better, right? Because clearly this person is doing their homework, right? And if they're doing their homework for the interview, hopefully they're going to do their homework when they're researching a prospect. I actually had a candidate last year apply for an account manager position, and I was overseas in New Zealand actually, so I was doing most of the interviews via Skype. And when she introduced herself, she actually sent me a video email, and that's rarely happened. But I got to tell you, she got the job. But it's just hard to not pay attention to those little details. And of course, when I got on the actual Skype interview with that person, it was, they delivered a much more natural sort of engaging experience where you can tell they knew a lot about the company. They actually knew someone that already had worked here, so they had done a tremendous amount of homework. So it was one of those interviews where the questions were actually split maybe 60-40 or something. So I mean, she was asking me almost as many questions as I was asking her, so it was a very fluid, natural conversation. And I think that's the most important thing that someone can do as they prepare for an interview is once again, not just look at the website, but look, can you find the core values? Do you really get a sense of their competition? And frankly, you can find most of this stuff out online in 20 or 30 minutes. So if it's a company that you feel like you're a great fit on, if it's a company you're excited to be a part of, taking that time is super valuable.
Yeah. I mean, even because it is the most important sales call, and it's a very unique sales call in that you only have that hour with that person. And, almost everybody is pretty public today. I'm sure you have a Facebook page, maybe an Instagram page, and you've been on my podcast. I'm sure you've been on other podcasts, and people can very quickly understand what matters to you. And to not go and understand that instead of just the classic interview questions is really a big mistake.
It is. No, it is. And I got to tell you that it surprises me for sure when I walk into the room, and it doesn't happen often, right? And I don't really care, honestly, that they necessarily know who I am, but it is a bit surprising at times when, and actually I find it, frankly, from the people that what I seem to be, or at least looking at their resume and their experience, have that great degree. They've been out in the market. They've had some decent experience, and I'll walk in and they don't even know that I'm the founder of the company, which is strange. So you can tell from that entire meeting, and typically what I get back are these like very fluid, articulate, amazing responses that they probably rehearsed like 500 times, and they say without stuttering, and it sounds perfect. But when you start breaking down that wall, and what I do in those situations, I start asking some really awkward questions that there are zero chance that they had any ability to prepare for. And usually a couple of things happen. They can either reset and you get to really see who the person is, and it could be a good thing. But most of the time you find that they're not prepared for that, and they kind of struggle and they battle through those questions and battle through it not in a good way. In the sense that you get done, it's like, man, this person does not have the ability to be quick on their feet. They're not agile. And so those are the interviews that really don't go well. So yeah, to your point, it's more than just the typical questions. It's really kind of taking that deep breath and really being more focused on a conversation as opposed to just regurgitating rehearsed responses.
Yeah. And, I've been on both sides of it quite often. And because it's so weird because not everybody's looking for the same thing. Have you guys developed a particular process that you go through as far as typically when I did it, I never want to interview anybody that a manager below me wouldn't hire. Meaning, even if the person's in for the whole day, if you're not going to hire them, don't, take an hour of my time.
Sure.
And I try and, walk them through, have them walk me through a deal that they've done. and see how well they can articulate what they did. And that's kind of hard because salespeople, the best ones become unconsciously competent, where they know,
right? Of course,
yeah, they know how to do it, but they can't articulate how they do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, going back to our process, typically when someone comes in, they usually meet with 4 to 5 people. And so to your point, if they don't make it through those individuals, it will rarely get to me. Sometimes there'll be some question marks. So like, hey, the skill set might be there, but I'm not sure about the cultural fit. And that's perfectly okay. But usually if they don't make it through those 4 or 5 people, it wouldn't land on my plate. So that's how we do the process. And usually we need a unanimous decision. Occasionally, I'll throw a veto out there if I really feel like maybe the person's not a great fit, or if maybe I sense something that really could be great in terms of growth, and we take a risk in that situation. But I've found more times than not, it's better to just sort of use that democracy to make sure that we're not making mistakes. And the way that we hire, though, it's crazy. I mean, we are so critical on every aspect, not just the skill set, but the culture. I think that's another important piece too. It's like, just because you know the job well, or you have an amazing ability in the sales process and you can negotiate amazingly, if you're not a good person, or if you're kind of rude, or you have this sort of cocky behavior that's just not going to assimilate with the way that we do business here, we don't want you around, right? And so we look at, from a core value perspective across the board, just the little things too in terms of how they interact. And I think probably what I get more excited about in an interview than anything is just when I get questions asked to me. Not so because I care, once again, I want them talking more, right? Because I basically go into the interview assuming that it's a no. So I go in sort of prepared for them to convince me that my no shouldn't be a no. And I always take that approach. So, I always come in where, if they don't blow me away, there's no chance they're getting the job. So that's how the set is. But I've always found that when people start asking me some questions back and we can open up a more organic conversation, that typically is the best. And it's just simple things like, hey, what are you looking for in a rep? What are the typical goals that your sales reps have? What has made your top sales reps great within this company? And these are just little things where it's not even my response. What I love back is when I give my response to see how are they willing to interact and engage and have this really cool conversation with me, or are they just rolling on to their next question? And so these are little things that I look for. But I think the most important thing, other than researching and preparing the next thing, is really being prepared to ask amazing questions throughout the interview process.
So you're really looking for curiosity to kind of pull.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interesting that you had that. You go in with a no.
I do.
As opposed to a maybe.
Yeah. It's always a no, but I think going back to those questions, it's once again, how can someone convince me that they're the right person to interview if they have no idea what my motivation is, right? If they have no idea what I look for in a sales rep, or if they have no clue about what our culture and core values are and how we operate as a company. I mean, once again, it just goes back. If you're just answering the questions you're given and you're not engaging that person, it's not because when I get asked questions about how did you start the company, or talk to me about, what it was like in the early years when you found it, those are all fun questions, right? But what I look more for is their ability to use my responses and apply that throughout the interview so that we can have a more engaging conversation, right? Because that's what the sales process is, right? I mean, you got to understand and reverse engineer the person you're talking to be able to deliver the right product, to understand what their motivations, what their needs are. And so I just get excited when sales reps, even if it doesn't go perfectly, just willing to put themselves out there and go through that process. That's always very huge for me.
And from a company standpoint, what is the smartest, most effective way to get that interview? Let's say you don't even have an opening. Let's say, because a superstar, if you found a superstar tomorrow, even though you don't have budget, you'd probably find a way of getting them, wouldn't you?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how would they get to have a conversation with you?
Well, knowing someone in the company is probably the best way, or at least if you don't know, being able to get introduced to me or introduced to the company through a referral, that's probably the easiest, even if it's not an internal employee, whether it's a customer or a partner or someone we do business with, because we pay attention to those, right? I think that's super important. And I think just taking a risk and putting yourself out there. I mean, I can tell you, the person that manages our account management team, we actually were not really looking for someone for the specific role that she hired in for. At that time, there were some support people we were looking at, but she literally saw our job ad online, we were sort of winding down the interview process. We weren't really ready to have that next conversation. She just came to our building and buzzed. She came right on up, acted like she owned the place. She was super personable, an amazing, like, gregarious personality, very affable, fun conversation. And, she met me, she met my partner, she met a few people within the company, and she was here maybe 20 minutes, and she walked out. And I looked at her, like, yeah, we probably got to hire her. So we brought her back the next day for an interview, and I believe we hired her, I think, the very next day after that. So within 2 days, she had a job. And it's because she took the risk to do something that's very uncomfortable, right? Just to come in and say hi, and she ended up getting the job because she did it.
And this is what drives me insane, because I talk to so many people that go, well, I filled out the application online and I've got the letter back from them, so I'm waiting for an interview. And I'm like, you're not going to get a job that way.
No.
That's not the way it works.
No. The market's crazy right now. Here's what I can tell you. I mean, I know unemployment's low, but anytime we post a job, the amount of applications that we get, it's unreasonable. Now, based on where we're a SaaS company. We've got this super cool culture. We have this old nightclub that we renovated, 2-story nightclub that's got this super fun space, a lot of fun, energetic people here. And we're right in the middle of, if you're familiar with Indianapolis, it's an area called Broad Ripple. It's where all the bars and restaurants are. So we're in this super cool space. People know about us. And so anytime we post a job, I'm telling you, we get hundreds of applications. Literally hundreds, to the point where we actually have a hard time screening every application that comes in. And then we get in situations where when we get down to the very end and we need 1 or 2 people, it's like, man, we could really hire like 8 of these. Like absolutely 8 of these, and they would all probably be more than fantastic. And so that's what we get in. But the people that, of course, end up getting the job are doing exactly what you're talking about. Is they put in the resume and they follow up, right? They place a phone call in. And I can tell you that anytime, because once again, we do struggle screening all the resumes. Anytime someone makes a call or sends an email, we always make it a point to go check on that person. We make it a point to set aside, okay, that person's name, maybe we didn't get to that person yet, let's go check them out. And I can't think of a specific example, but I'm sure that's helped some people get jobs here by being able to put in the extra effort, right? Because I think just submitting the application, waiting for a callback is the worst thing you can do.
And that's it, because you look at an application, because they all look the same, don't they? I mean,
oh, they do.
It's like, oh, that school's better than this, or, that company's better than that. Oh, they stayed there long enough to show some performance. There's good quota numbers, blah, blah, blah. Then you get the resume. They all look pretty much the same, because everybody goes online and says this is what a resume should look like. But when you call somebody, when you talk to somebody, when you connect with them as a human being, this is a sale.
Of course.
Right? And you're selling, hopefully, the best product you've ever had yourself. And, if you're relying on the stupid system, you're just one of those 100 applications. And
exactly.
And if 10 of them are A-level qualified, you get 1 out of 10 chance. And this is what I think people are taught. We go through school, okay, you sit in a line, you raise your hand, you follow the rules, but that's not how the real world works.
No, it doesn't.
It's about people.
It is.
How about recruiters? Do you ever use recruiters?
Not really. No, I mean, just based on the way we do. Frankly, we get a lot of referrals in. And I think also because of sort of our location, who we are as a company, where we are at here in the community, the tech community in Indianapolis, that we usually get so many submissions that we don't need to really pay for a recruiter. And
I bet, just from looking at the pictures of your building, the pictures of your layout, you can pretty much get a sense of the culture and who would fit in. Now, how important is how they dress? That suit and tie or the business suit, or is that a big issue for you guys?
Not really, no. I mean, we're very casual. So I wear a suit a couple of times a year, right? Usually when I'm in
Easter and Christmas, right?
Yeah, no, not even that. Typically a wedding and maybe sadly occasionally a funeral, and that's about it. So I don't wear a lot of suits. So it's very casual here. And when someone comes in, that's not a judgment call at all. If they wear a suit, that's perfectly fine. It's an interview, so they prep for it. If they come in with a button down and jeans, that's fine too. That, based on how we operate, that I'm totally indifferent to that. I'm looking at much deeper things as I'm in the conversation. But I think each culture is different. So not everyone would probably be that relaxed in terms of dress code. So it's just knowing probably the culture, like you said, and making sure you're prepared for that.
And how about as far as coachability? Because that's been something that I've consistently heard from sales leaders is that they want that as almost like number one or number two.
Yeah, I would say, honestly, for us, it's probably number one. I'm surprised that we're just now getting to it 15, 20 minutes in. We do try to identify that. But I would tell you, Brian, that's one of the harder things that I believe we struggle with in the interview process to really understand. Now, we always try to give them some scenarios related to maybe a challenge they had and try to give them feedback and see how they respond. There's some things that we do to try to pull that out. But I think what we rely on is the fact that with 4 or 5 of us talking to them throughout the process, that hopefully one of us will be able to identify if they may not be coachable. Because to your point, that is by far the most important piece. Because let me tell you this, even where I'm at 36 building my company, I want to learn every day. I want to be better every day. I want to grow every day. And so anybody that comes into any sales position that thinks they know it all, they don't. There's no chance they do. Because everything changes, the market changes, the dynamics of the market changes, the tools we use change, competitors change. And so, if someone comes in and they're not willing to grow with those changes, they're not willing to learn and become better on a regular basis, be able to respond to that coaching and improve how they operate here, we certainly do not want them around. So I would say, to your point, it's 100% number one most important thing.
And I think it's also like an emotional thing because some people, when they're feeling or when they get feedback, they take it personally and it hurts them emotionally as opposed to somebody who's like, when you take guitar lessons, right? You're taking a lesson because you don't know how to play the guitar or you want to play it better. So you're seeking that as opposed to, oh, well, wait a second. I know how to play the guitar. It's kind of a mindset or you can kind of get over it. And some people, when their eyes start watering up and it's like it's a personal attack, it's not a personal attack.
No, not at all. And look, I got to tell you, if their skin is that thin, right, they're probably going to struggle through sales calls. I mean, how are they going to handle the tough objections? How are they going to handle the think about it. I mean, how many no's do you have to get to before you get a yes, right? So I think that's the challenge. I would say, just as we're talking about that, I would say that's the other thing that I look for. And it's really hard to understand, but I'll ask some things about like what books are you reading? What podcasts are you currently listening to or following? Those things all kind of matter to me. And it's okay, especially for our younger sales reps that are maybe entry level, just sort of getting into their career. I think for when I'm looking at a more senior person, if they're not reading books, if they don't listen to podcasts, if they're doing 0 things to make themselves better, they're probably average. Because I can tell you, when you look at our team here and you look at our very best sales rep, this actually I think was what sets them apart. They're the ones that they get in a little bit earlier in the morning and they know our competition better than anybody. On the way into the office, they're listening to podcasts. They're reading books on a regular basis. They're going to seminars. They're doing things to make them better. They frankly come up to me. I just had a dinner with one of my sales reps last week and he hit me up and said, hey man, I've been trying to make some improvements in a couple areas. These are some things that I kind of want to work on. It was specifically working on larger deals. And we sort of built a plan to help him do that. I think any sales rep that's not making an effort to be better is 100% going to be average, and they're going to be looked over. And who wants to be average? So, that's it. It's really hard to come out. Because the other thing that I think is difficult in the interview is you really got to see, are they being genuine, right? When you ask them if they're reading a book, I think it's easy to say they are, but are they really doing it? And that's stuff you'll just find out, I think, after you get them on board and find out if they're really willing to learn. But I think learning goes along with coaching. And that is, if you don't want to grow, if you don't want to be better, if you don't want to improve at what you're doing, then you're going to have a difficult time being an amazing salesperson.
And how about particular things, what they did in high school and college, whether it be sports? A lot of sales leaders look for that. A lot of people look for adversity, where they overcame something. A lot of people look for competitiveness, because the sports thing helps a lot because, most likely, especially if it's a team sport as opposed to an individual sport, where they want to be number one, where that is a particular personality characteristic as opposed to somebody who wants to be in the Peace Corps or something that's motivated by something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Oh, I can tell you, we do not look at high school at all, right? I think a high school team sport, look, if you played some sports, it's fantastic. It might show something, but I'm super, super indifferent to that. I would say collegiate athletes will certainly look at that, especially on the sales side, because to your point, a lot of times we find, and we have some collegiate athletes here, they're more disciplined, right? And frankly, to be able to make it through a 4-year school where you're paying a collegiate sport, I mean, you're going to have to grind, right? You're going to have to be coachable. And those are some of the things that we look for. And we often find that those are the most competitive people. So that makes a huge difference, I think, as we're interviewing. But to be honest with you, I would say personally, though, that wouldn't be a make or break for me at all, especially as you go far back as high school. You know, I look more about, like, what are you doing now? You know, what have you done to improve yourself now? Where are you at in your career? And especially if you're a senior level person, if you've been doing sales for quite a long time, there's a lot of transformations you make as you go from high school to college, your early 20s, mid 20s. And so I give probably the benefit of the doubt. And I'd say definitely if I'm looking for someone that has 10, 15 years experience, I am much more curious about what they've done in the last 2 years of their life than what they did 10 or 15 years ago. But that's just me. I would say, to your point, though, to make sure we're being fair here, I would say some of the people I know in the industry and other people that run companies, definitely that competitiveness, those collegiate sports, those sort of things, many people do look for. So I'm probably one of the outliers in that regard.
How about things like GPA or, pedigree? Does that matter to you?
Not to me. No difference. Yeah, not at all.
Good. We're aligned
It
there.
doesn't. Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, what do you find? Do you find a lot of people are paying attention to that now?
Not now, but one of the early interviews I had, somebody asked me my GPA, and I had already been out of school almost 10 years. And I looked at him, I go, look, I went to school at night.
Yeah.
And I taught myself how to program. And I mean, if you're looking for, a professor, you got the wrong guy. But if you're looking for a sales
Right.
guy, that's me.
I'm the guy. Yeah, no, that's especially in the sales side. But I would say in general, I find that a lot of resumes don't even really put their GPA on them. I don't even really care. I would say the one thing for sure, if it's like a top level school, that would probably stand out a little bit more if it's maybe a lower tier or smaller school, but only relatively. Especially if the experience is there, especially if they're involved in a lot of things, and I feel like there might be a story behind that. Even in that regard, if I get someone that comes in and they're from a top tier school and you have someone from a low level school, but I like the story better, I see the energy better on the person that may not have been at a top tier school, that makes no difference to me. I would definitely choose that person. So I think to your point, I mean, the education is important. I think it's important to get through all of that, but it certainly does not weigh one way or the other on how we make a hiring decision here.
How about as far as what drives them? What's their motive? In what priority do you find that, as far as is it money? Is it competition? Is it career growth? Is it, building something? What do you look for?
Yeah, well, I think to some regard, anybody that's not at least mildly motivated to make some more money,
Doesn't
it doesn't work. It really doesn't. I have found some people that don't really care about money, and you find that they're just not as hungry, right? They hit their goals and they kind of feel good about it. But, what I love is you double your goals every month, and then you push your goals even farther the month after that. And so I'd say money for sure. When I hear someone in an interview that says money doesn't mean much to them and they're interviewing for a sales position, that is somewhat of a red flag to me, as much as I hate to say it. It doesn't mean that we won't necessarily hire them if all the other things might fall into place. We feel like we can drive them and get them motivated in other ways. But I would say that would be a very tough call if you're going into sales and you're not motivated by money. I would say competitiveness to some degree is probably got to be important, because I think anytime, like the way that we run our sales meetings here every week is we have a scorecard and we track all the high level things, right? So calls made, appointments set, webinars ran, closed deals, revenue generated, upgrades, things of that nature. And if you're coming into that meeting and you're at the low, the bottom of that list and you don't really care, that is definitely a problem. So I would say competition is a good thing, but I've actually seen competition be a negative thing as well. So I think there's like a really interesting balance there on being competitive and wanting to drive and beat your people, but not to the point of where you're trying to steal leads and doing things that just really sort of, you lose integrity, right? So I think that's balanced. But money and competition, by far, I think those are definitely important things.
Yeah, you can definitely go a little overboard. Your competitiveness is like anything can go wrong. But
sure.
How about as far as closing you? What happens if the interview goes really great? You like the person, They seem to be a culture match. They got the intellectual power, the competitiveness, but they don't close you. They don't ask for the job. They don't find out, where do I rank? Are you going to give me a yes? Or I'm not leaving the room until I hear it.
I would say funny if you think. I would say subconsciously it's a little awkward for me if at the end of the interview I ask if they have, do you have any questions? I can tell you number one, unless they ask amazing questions throughout the entire interview process and they say no, that to me is a red flag. If I did most of the talking in terms of most of the question asking and they get to the end and they have no questions, I can tell you that is a red flag. The second piece is if they don't, because they should at least ask, look, what's your time frame for hiring? Where do I, how do I rank against some of the other people you're hiring? I've had people ask me, is there anything that we've done today that would, put you in a position where you wouldn't want to hire me? Or, did you like the way that we went today? Would you consider me hireable? I've had people ask me all of those questions, and I think they're fantastic because it at least gets the conversation going a little bit longer and it gets me thinking more. I would say beyond just the interview, though, anybody that leaves that interview and never follows up, I can tell you 100% has never got a job here.
Yeah.
Period. At least a thank you, but I look for a little bit more than that, which is like, thank you. I love your company. Is there anything else that we can talk about or that I can do to prove that I'm the right person for the job? Like those are things to me. It's like, I love that initiative. And I mean, I would say I bet 30-40% of people, and I've had people that I have literally blown me away in the interview, not just me, but other people here within the company, but have not followed up with as much as a thank you afterwards. They have not gotten the job. We never talk to them again. So I think the follow-up, the close piece is super important.
That's it. I think anybody who follows up, and then if they felt that there was a weakness, that they show, a reference, they, introduce you to somebody, a customer that you can talk to that would,
sure.
Yeah, that would demonstrate their value. I think people have got to get outside the box, especially when it's an interview, because this is a bizarre sales call. This is your only chance. And what I tell people is, let's say you're mediocre about the job, whatever it is, or you got a better offer, you got a couple of offers, you have to go for the offer, because until you get the offer, it's 100% their choice.
Oh, it is. It is. Totally.
Until you get the offer, because then once you've given the offer, now you've got to, if you really want that person, you've got to close them.
Yeah, you have to. No, it's a good point. I think, a lot of people just, and it might go back to, I think in the beginning you're asking a little bit about, I don't know if entitlement was the word you used, but I think to some degree they come in and they feel like they have great experience, they have a great degree, they have all these things in place. They almost feel like, man, I am the best person for the job. But then they walk out and don't do any of the things that show them that they are a good salesperson, like following up, sitting around waiting for an offer to come that may not come. I think that's a critical piece, right? Just going back to, you got to make sure you're putting the effort in to get that offer coming to you.
That's it. No matter what your experience level, no matter how good you are or how you've got to go for the offer if you want one.
Yeah, no doubt. I would say the other thing too, and I look back to how we've hired over the last couple of years. Going back to our product, which is a video email software. So like anybody that's a SaaS company, I mean, if you're interviewing at a software company, to be able to, especially if they have a free trial, I think getting that is important. If it's not a software company, whatever the business is, the more that you can, send an inquiry in online to see what their follow-up process is, to see what sort of emails they send out to get a sense of what their language is as they talk to prospects and customers. I think that's important. But I would tell you that probably a two easy closes that probably end up happening to me were people that after the interview happened sent me personal videos back using our software, thanking me for their time, sort of, talking a bit more. I remember one specifically talked a bit more about sort of their skill set and referenced some of the things I had said in the interview and why they felt like they were the perfect fit. They got the job the next day. And I can tell you, we were looking, I remember that hire, we were looking at 2 or 3 other people, and I was very unsure which direction I was going to go. We just made the call then. It just made it easy for me. I didn't have to think about it anymore.
And that seems so obvious to do, but what percentage of the people did it?
No, oh God, I mean, less than 1%. Yeah, right? If we're lucky. Incredible, yeah.
Hey, cool. Really enjoyed this conversation. Give us a little update on what you guys are up to this year.
Yeah, so this year we've got a lot of things going on. So we set up an office in Zagreb, Croatia. We're putting a development team there. We're also focused on expanding our marketing and sales initiatives out into the European Union. So we're currently marketing very heavy in the UK right now, particularly England. And then we're also working with a lot of the countries around the Adriatic, selling our product into the tourism industry because it's a fantastic way to use video. And so I think what I'm really excited about is sort of our expansion into the European market. Now, we've been playing in that space for probably 3 or 4 years now, 5 years, but really sort of passively. It's people that have really found us online. We have a couple resellers there, but we put that office there, and now we're really putting our stake in the ground saying we're going to grow massively in Europe. So I'm very excited about that. We have a lot of very, very cool development things happening. I'm going to keep those tight-lipped in just case our competitors listen. I don't want them to do it before we release them, but we have some very cool new functionality that we're releasing, so I'm very excited about 2018.
Great. Really enjoyed the conversation, Jason.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, those were some pretty good stories. But what you learn is that an interview is kind of a pure sell, meaning that the product is you. You don't know anything better than you know yourself, but you have to understand that the other person doesn't know you. And you have to communicate that, and you have to connect with the other person. You can't rely on your product in the case of the resume, and you can't rely on the official system, because the official system puts you equal to everybody else, and that doesn't help you. You need an unfair advantage today. And the biggest unfair advantage you can have beyond the podcast is start the conversation and get the meeting course. Now, the price is going to go up again March 1st. Why? Because I'm putting so much more new content into it. We had our first office hours last Friday. The next one will be February, 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're on a member of the class, you're in there. I recorded the last one. It's already up into the course. Check it out. I'm also putting new modules in every week. I'm really trying to help you answer all your questions. So it's not a one-on-one course, but it's really pretty detailed. I'm putting an enormous amount of time into it because I really want to help you crush it this year. And this is the time to start your deals. We have 11 months left to go, and we really have to stay focused on new accounts. The stuff that comes to us, that's going to happen. What we have to do is be able to go out to cold people who don't know us, don't know if they even need us, may have a solution already. But how do we start that conversation with them? So I've got new modules, new tools in there, the office hours, answering all your questions. Really working hard for you. Please connect up with me on LinkedIn. And if you see my content on LinkedIn, I'm putting up some pretty funny videos every day. Please like them, comment, share them with your friends, and maybe get a little bit of a laugh. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
I want to know the truth, because deep down in places that you don't talk about are team and management meetings. You want me on that call. You need me on that call. We use words like fleet view, volume control, total cost of ownership. We use these words as a backbone of a life spent negotiating something. You use them as a punchline. I have neither the time nor inclination to explain myself to people who rise and sleep under the very blanket of revenue that I provide and then question the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, may I suggest you pick up a phone and make some sales calls. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you're entitled to.
Did you expense the lap dances?
I did the job I was hired.
Did you expense the lap dances?
You're goddamn right I did!